My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review of Spider-Man No Way Home. And this will be a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch it, then come back and watch my review because I will be going in depth. I'm like the last person to see this movie, but I finally did. I went into it with very low expectations. Like, I did a video with me saying how awful I think this movie looks. And I still stand by plenty of the points I made in that video, but I did end up enjoying it. Let's talk about with what I did like. Tom Holland gives maybe his best performance yet. He's really great in this movie. Like, he gets to show off his dramatic side a bit more, and he pulls it off. Zendaya, I've always loved her take on MJ. I've always found her to be a unique love interest, and that's still the case here. I think she's hilarious, she's really charming and sweet, and the two have really good chemistry. I really did care for the relationship between Peter and MJ, and that's necessary for this movie to work. But my favorite performance in this entire movie is Willem Dafoe. My goodness, I loved him in the 2002 Spider-Man movie, but what he brings to this character here is just the perfect amount of pure insanity. And oh my goodness, he's just wonderful to watch in this movie. The first 20 minutes we see him, I'm just like, okay, he's fine or whatever, but once he turns full evil, he was just chewing up the scenery, he was just the life of the movie, and he was truly terrifying. Like, when Peter Parker's punching him in the face and he's just laughing and has the biggest smile on his face, he's legitimately really terrifying in that moment. And you can just tell that Willem Dafoe is having the time of his life playing this character, and I'm glad he got to come back and give one more amazing performance as the Green Goblin because, wow, did he impress me. Another great performance in this movie is Andrew Garfield. I think Andrew Garfield really redeems himself here. I'm not the biggest fan of his Amazing Spider-Man movies, but I also think that he is the best part of those movies. But I also think he brings enough to his character that we didn't quite see in his other movies. I think he brings a lot of humanity to him, a lot of regret, a lot of pain, and he just showcases it so perfectly. I thought this version of Spider-Man became infinitely more interesting in this one movie. So I thought Andrew Garfield was really great, and that scene where he catches MJ, I knew it was coming. I saw the trailer and I'm just like, okay, yeah, he's definitely gonna catch her and he's gonna redeem himself for letting Gwen fall. And even though I knew it was going to happen, when he catches her, and his reaction on his face, it was actually a really powerful moment. And just the way it ties into his other movies, like, I feel like we just got a character arc within this one small moment, and I was really impressed by his acting here. The first 20 minutes of this movie I did really like. I do still wish that we got to see the different ramifications of the world knowing that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. If he was a fugitive on the run, I think that could have been a really cool plot. But I'm not talking about the movie I want, I'm talking about the movie I got. And I like how they show how difficult it makes life for him when everyone knows. You know, he's willing to take the punches and all that, but when he sees that it starts to affect MJ and Ned, that's when he starts to rethink everything. And I like that about this character. In fact, Peter's character arc is the strength of this movie. It is why it works as well as it does. All the multiverse stuff I'll get to in a bit, but Peter's arc grounds this entire movie, and I really do think it's a powerful emotional journey. From him being like, no, it's okay, you know, I can have everything, and just trying to make everything work, no matter the cost it has on the people around him, and then him losing someone that he truly loves and truly cares about, and then thinking that, and then realizing that he can't have it all. That a part of being Spider-Man is sacrificing everything else to be Spider-Man. And you feel the weight of that. My favorite moment of this movie is the entire last 20 minutes. When he tells MJ that they're gonna forget who he is. And she's like, you gotta come back to me. We gotta make this work. And Peter promises her that. It is genuinely some of the most emotional stuff in the entire MCU. And it concludes his character arc in such a compelling way. And then Peter's going to go see MJ and tell her about everything, and he has a whole speech prepared. But when he sees that her head's injured, he realizes that he's hurt those around him, and that he can't do that to her. So he doesn't go ahead with it. And I just thought it was a very satisfying character beat. You know, you got the ending of The Amazing Spider-Man, where Gwen's dad's just like, keep Gwen out of this. And then Peter breaks up with Gwen, he doesn't talk to her, and she knows why. And then 2 minutes later, they immediately backtrack that. It ruins any emotional impact that movie could have had. And I'm glad they didn't go on that route here. I found it to be very satisfying, and it reminded me of Spider-Man 2, my favorite superhero movie. You know, the whole point of Spider-Man 2 is that he started to see Spider-Man as a burden. You know, that he'd rather be Peter Parker than Spider-Man, but it's just not in his nature to. And he has to be willing to give up everyone he loves the most in order to live this life that he must live. And I feel like we got this in this character arc. And that is the reason why this movie works for me. And then we got one scene that nobody's talking about, but it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie easily, and that's the mirror dimension scene. Look, I love Doctor Strange. It's one of my favorite MCU movies, and to see Spider-Man and Doctor Strange fight in the mirror dimension and just have those trippy visuals here, it was just, I love that moment. It was just awesome. It was thrilling. It was exciting. I loved it. And there are lots of great moments in this movie, like just lots of smaller moments, like when Ned's just like, Peter, and all the Spider-Men point to each other like, yes? Peter Parker. Yes, we are all Peter Parker. And they're all just saying everything at the same time. I thought that was a really funny moment. The moment where the three Spider-Men are swinging off of the Statue of Liberty and are about to fight, that was a moment that gave me goosebumps. There was lots of great moments in this movie, but there's also some mixed elements of it, which I'll begin talking about Aunt May's death here. Because I love the idea of Peter losing Aunt May here and how that contributes to his character arc. And when Peter and Green Goblin are fighting and he kills her, I thought that was a really impactful moment. But then after that explosion, Aunt May gets up and she's fine, and she's just fine enough to say a few last words to him. And I don't think Marissa Tomei was very good in this movie, and I don't think her delivery was good here. And just the fact that she's okay after that explosion just to say those words, it didn't work for me. I thought the moment had enough impact already, and they tried a bit too hard afterwards. Another mixed element I have about this movie is Tobey Maguire. I don't think he's bad in this movie. I think he's good. He's my favorite Spider-Man because I think he works best in those Sam Raimi movies. That said, I wish he had a bit more to do here. Like, I feel like Andrew Garfield was given a bit more to work with, and Tobey Maguire, you don't get that. He's still good. I love seeing him again as Spider-Man. I just wish he had a bit more to do. And another mixed element of this movie, and I admit, this is very nitpicky, but in a world filled with magic and technology, it just seems like they can come up with anything when necessary, and it doesn't feel grounded in reality. I love Peter's character arc, and I love where it ends off. But I have to mention, and I know this is nitpicky, that you can't just erase people's memory and just expect them to be the same person. Peter and MJ were a part of each other's lives. And if Peter was erased from her memory, she'd be different as a person. That's just how memory works. Your experiences with people shape who you become. And also, that said, I don't really buy the fact that MJ and Ned would still be friends afterwards. I feel like they were only friends because of Peter. So I don't really see that friendship continuing in a Peterless world for them. But yeah, I know that's nitpicky. It doesn't have any effect on my score for this movie, but it's still there. And actually, I will say that I thought the musical score by Michael Giacchino here is probably his best score for these Spider-Man movies. I haven't been impressed by his work in the MCU, even though he's a great composer. But this is his best work yet in the MCU. I thought it was a pretty good score. But getting to my negatives, and I do have quite a bit, but let's just talk about the main storyline. The main storyline did not work for me. All my issues with the multiverse that I had before this movie, I still stand by. I'm always going to separate the original movies from this one because to me, Doc Ock's end at the end of Spider-Man 2 is satisfying like that. Doc Ock willing to sacrifice himself after all the destruction he's caused. It's a great character beat to end off on. And I just don't like the fact that it gets ruined by this movie somewhat. Like, that's why I have to separate them. The ending of Spider-Man 3, where Peter forgives Sandman, is a really emotionally powerful moment that gets ruined by this movie. So I always have to separate the two. So, I still don't like the idea of the multiverse. I will say they actually did handle the two Peter Parkers really well because they just weren't there for fan service, even though that was definitely a big part of their appearance, but they did have a war to solve in Peter's character arc. Another issue I have with this movie is at the core of it, there's a moral question of whether or not Peter should send the villains back to get killed. Aunt May tells Peter that he shouldn't, that he should try to find a way to save them. And this is at the core of the story, and this did not work for me at all, because the movie is trying to side with Aunt May and Peter's decisions, and I just think it's wrong. I think it shows that Aunt May and Peter are naive. In fact, I was hoping that this would play a role in Peter's character arc of the fact that he's been naive, and because he was naive, he got his aunt killed. And that falls on him a little bit. And I wish they played that up a bit more, but no, the movie's just like, oh nope, Peter did the right thing, you know. But like, these are villains who have killed plenty of people, and if they aren't sent back, the very fabric of reality could be torn apart. So I don't agree with the movie on there. And even though I loved Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin, all the other villains did nothing for me here. I thought Doc Ock was way too over the top. He came across in a very cartoonish manner. I thought Electro was terribly written. I thought the Lizard was terribly written. I thought Sandman was the worst written. Like, they say that Thomas Hayden Church played him in the end credits, but he never actually physically shows up, and I heard that he was only willing to voice him. So I don't know what happened there, but anytime that character appeared, the CGI was off, and it just took me out of it. But even the way the character was written, like, he's kind of meant to be, like, because he's never really been a cliche villain. Like, if you watch Spider-Man 3, he doesn't get killed. He accepts Peter's forgiveness and just kind of hides away. And we see elements of that character here where he doesn't want to fight Spider-Man. You know, when Electro's about to turn bad, he's like, don't do it. And then all of a sudden, he's the villain again. Like, why? So I thought all the characters were written terribly in that regard. And like I mentioned earlier, the fact that there's a cure for the villains to turn them good again, I heard about that plot point before I saw the movie, and it sounded incredibly stupid to me, and it's not as stupid as I expected, but it still seems really contrived that they can just come up with this technology to turn them good. It's just, how much suspension of disbelief am I willing to use here? And it's quite a bit that's needed. Lots of the jokes do not land in this movie. I think whenever it tries to use the MCU humor, it holds the movie back a bit, and the constant references to the other movies is way overdone. Doc Ock says the power of the sun in the palm of my hands like a billion times in this movie, but the reason why he uses that in Spider-Man 2 is because he literally made his own mini sun, and it's in the palm of his tentacles. It's not just this line that can be copied and pasted here. There's one moment where Norman Osborn's just like, you know, I'm something of a scientist myself, and I'm just like, oh, really? There's a joke with Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire where Andrew Garfield helps his back, and Peter's just like, Tobey's just like, my back, as I think it's in reference to Spider-Man 2, and that stuff did not work for me at all. A few more issues I have with this movie is in the final battle, Ned opens a portal, and then he gets the cube thing, and he can't close the portal for some reason, and he doesn't even think to take the ring off. And then the final battle is happening, and like 15 minutes later, we see Ned and Zendaya still standing at the portal trying to close it. I'm like, have they just been standing there for the past 15 moments? It came across really stupid. And then also, Doctor Strange just happens to come in at the end when all the multiverse spell stuff is going on and where they need him. It's very contrived. The introduction of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is beyond underwhelming. Like, I know the Portals moment in Avengers Endgame was truly amazing, but to have these characters appear again to the Portals, it feels a bit redundant at this point. And just for them to be like, find Peter Parker, and then they're just like, oh, what's this portal? And then they just walk through the portal into a living room and that's it. You know, I know lots of people love that moment, and lots of people opening night were losing their minds, but I'm seeing it 2 months later. There was no one losing their minds in my almost dead theater, and without that extra audience excitement, it is a very, very underwhelming moment. And I also don't like the fact that Tobey Maguire didn't die at the end. Like, it feels like they kind of planned for him to die. Like, he gets stabbed. It's a big sacrifice moment. And then he just doesn't die. I don't know, I felt like they were going to kill him off and then they backtracked because they're like, maybe we want to bring him back for a future movie. So, I don't know. Also, the one scene with Matt Murdock was very underwhelming. It didn't add anything at all to the movie for me. But my one last issue with this movie isn't so much about this movie, it's about everything surrounding this movie, and it's that everybody knew. Everyone knew that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were in this movie. Everyone. And yeah, it's great that they showed up, but I kind of would have preferred to be surprised if they kind of misled the audience a bit more with the trailers, if they hid the casting news better, if these pictures won't leak. Like, I just miss, I just feel like if I didn't know, that moment where they appear could have had a bit more wow factor to it. But I did know. And even if I saw this movie when it came out, I still would have known then. Everyone knew. I'm hearing lots of stuff now about Doctor Strange 2, and I feel like, once again, that lots of the surprises in that movie aren't going to be surprises. I just wish that studios actually tried to hide plot beats and surprises. Like, at the end of Pirates of the Caribbean 2 when Barbossa appears? When I first saw that movie, I'm just like, what? Barbossa's back? That's wild. But nowadays, 3 months before the movie comes out, it would have been like Jeffrey Rush to appear in Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, and it would have been spoiled. I just hate the fact that everything is spoiled these days before the movies even come out, but yeah. But, look, I know I had a lot of issues with this movie, and I stand by all those issues, but this movie did end up surprising me. I thought the character arc that Tom Holland's Peter Parker goes through was incredibly strong and has some really emotional moments in it. I think there's a lot of weight to everything going on in this movie. I think the mirror dimension fight scene is great. I think how they use Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire was really good, especially Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker. I thought Willem Dafoe was just fantastic as a Green Goblin. Like, if he had just 2 more scenes, I feel like he would have been my choice to win Best Supporting Actor this year because he's just that good in this movie. Yeah, the other villains aren't that well written. There's lots of multiverse nonsense. There's some areas of the plot that didn't work for me at all. But it is 2.5 hours long. I was entertained, so I'm still going to go ahead and give Spider-Man No Way Home a 6 out of 10. I will say that the title's a bit inaccurate because I did find my way home pretty easily after I saw this movie. But yeah, what did you think of Spider-Man No Way Home? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon, and Gavin out.